garbage heap or least favourite? I like garbage heap better. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. It is 2025. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope you all had a wonderful and safe holiday. I did. I caught up with my family and friends, so it was really nice. And to be honest, part of me doesn't want to be back. Even though this is a hobby for me, I kind of treat it almost like a job. So I bring out a video every week, and part of me feels like maybe I needed a little bit more time off. So I might take some time off in the near future. There's going to be a few changes to the channel, nothing major, just a few additional things I want to add, like I'm considering trying vlogging. I have no idea if it's going to come out, but I want to try at least. And I will be doing a few lives, which I'm very excited about. It means that I can talk to you guys directly in real time. I haven't got it set up just yet, but soon. Yeah. Okay. I'm waiting for the plane overhead to go away because it's really loud. As you can see, I'm recording outside because it is a beautiful sunny day in Melbourne. It is summer here. I know that most of my viewers are from the Northern Hemisphere, but yeah, we're going through summer and it was just too nice to pass up. Alright, today I am going to share with you my least favourite reads of 2024. And let me be clear, the term garbage heap was just for fun. It does not mean that the books themselves are garbage. I just thought it was funny and that's why I used it. This is simply my opinion on these books. These are books that didn't appeal to me, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. They were just not to my taste. Not every book is for every reader. I've said this many, many times and I truly believe it. I read around 104 or 105 books, I think, which is a lot more than the previous year. And I noticed that I read a lot more fantasy, much less mystery thrillers, a few science fiction, not enough, and a few classics. There are also a few other things that I threw in there depending upon my mood. It was a good year overall, but there were misses. There's always misses, right? That's something that happens. You just can't predict that you will love every single book. And I have chosen 10 to share with you. But before I go into my least favourite reads, I'm going to talk briefly about DNFs because I actually did DNF 4, which is a lot for me. The truth is, though, that I've been trying to DNF more often. I don't, but I should. And 2 of these, there's no surprise that I did DNF them. They were in a genre that I don't particularly enjoy. But I thought I'd try them. They didn't work out, which is why I didn't finish them. The first one is A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I think I read that or tried to read that in the beginning of January. I had tried Throne of Glass December of 2023 and I didn't like that at all. This one was a little bit better, but I could only get to a certain point and I thought, I just don't like it. I didn't like the writing. When I met the main character's sisters, they were so highly exaggerated and unrealistic that I thought, no, I don't want to read this. It's just not coming across as very realistic. So I think I gave up on that about 30 pages in, 40 pages roughly. The second one that I DNF'd was Born to Exile by Phyllis Eisenstein. This is a book that has been on my shelves for 30, 35 years. I even remember buying it because it was fantasy. I found it in the bookshop, so I bought it. And I never tried it until last year. It ended up being 4 short stories, I think. I started the first, and it's about a boy who has the ability to teleport. Really interesting, I thought. And who ends up going to a castle of a duke or a king, I can't recall. And it just kind of devolved into more a historical, maybe romance. It had all of those tropes. And whilst the writing was good, I just didn't enjoy it. I found it boring. I didn't see all that much world building. And I actually DNF'd the first short story or novella. I don't think I had much to go, and I thought, I don't care. I don't care about any of these characters. The third one was All Systems Red by Martha Wells, the first Murderbot book. I'd heard so much about it on Book YouTube, I thought I would give it a go. And I read, I think, around 80%, and I just didn't care. Didn't care about the characters, didn't like any of the characters, didn't feel most of them were fleshed out. The Murderbot itself, we didn't even get a description of what it looked like, and I thought that was kind of important when you're talking sci-fi. I wanted to know exactly what it looked like. I wanted to know a bit more of this sci-fi world that she has placed this character in. And instead it was like, well, here is this very depressed Murderbot who loves watching something like soaps and doesn't want anything to do with people. Yeah, I'm sorry, that self-indulgence just grated on me. And the rest of the characters, the crew, for example, that this Murderbot was attached to, yeah, they just blended. They just didn't feel distinctive. I found I didn't care about the story, and I certainly didn't care about any of the characters. And I don't regret DNFing it. If it's meant to be poignant, it didn't work for me. I didn't find it funny. Maybe it's meant to be. Well, it went over my head if that's the case. And the last one is the most recent one, actually. I just tried it just before the end of the year, and it was actually a Patreon book club read. Oh my goodness. Wow, yeah. Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. I had read about this book that it was an adult fantasy mystery. Yeah, what a load of crock. Seriously. I was so looking forward to trying it. I like the premise, which is about, I think it's 12 or 13 young heirs to duchies who go on like a cruise to the island of the goddess, and who each have a blessing, a magical ability. I thought, that sounds interesting. And there was also going to be a murder that had to be solved. So that sounded even more interesting because I like mysteries as well. Wow. Yeah. I started it, and I started messaging my patrons saying, has anyone read this? Because, oh my God, I hate it. It is terrible. It is young adult. The main character, and this is written in the first person, he is insufferable. I could not abide him. And then when he finally does get on the boat, he decides that he's going to alienate everyone by insulting them as much as he can. And I thought, wow, no. Yeah, no. I kept asking people, can I DNF at 7%? Because I can't stand this book. And in the end, I thought, you know what? I'm going to push through to 10%, 40 pages, because I bought this book and I own it. And that was as much as I could bear. A romantic interest was introduced that was so cliched, and There was also some foul language used, and I actually have no objection to swearing because, hey, I'm Australian and we do that all the time. But it was inappropriate where the swearing took place, and I thought, oh my God, no, this is not adult. This is clearly YA, maybe even romantasy, two subgenres I don't enjoy, and I could not abide the main character. And I haven't had such a visceral reaction to a book in a long time. The truth is, if I had known this was young adult, I would never have bought it. I wouldn't have read it. If I'd known it seemed like a romantasy, again, I wouldn't have bought it because that's not something I personally enjoy. I really resent being misled as to what a book is. And yet I saw several reviews or descriptions of this book as an adult fantasy. And it certainly wasn't. No. Now with these DNF books, because I have not read the entire books, I don't feel I'm entitled to say whether they're good or bad. It's simply that they didn't work for me, and that's why I gave up on them. Now these next 10 books are books that I actually did finish, that I read completely. And there is no particular order to this list, it's just whichever ones I remember. I'm going to start first with Black Mouth by Ronald Malfi, which I read for Horror October. I was so looking forward to this book. And whilst I did like it in parts, there were a few things I really disliked. It is a story about 4 people who went through something traumatic in their youth, in their childhood, I should say, who get back together as adults to defeat this evil, let's call it. Shades of It. Yeah, very reminiscent to It, except that these characters, I did not find I liked them all that much, especially our main character. We actually get to see different perspectives. One perspective is in first person, and he was the most unlikable in my opinion. Very self-indulgent character. And I just found myself bored with the story. I kept waiting for something interesting, for perhaps the chemistry between these characters to appeal to me. It didn't, not really. It seems that Malfi, because this is the second book of his I've read, and I didn't like the other one either, that was Cradle Lake, it seems he spends a lot of time on traumatic events that his characters go through. When I'm reading a horror novel, I'm not really interested in everyone's deep, dark secrets or traumatic childhood. I'm more interested in the horror element. So perhaps he's simply not an author for me, especially as there is one very gratuitous scene in the center of the book. New character is being introduced. Very first chapter that this character is introduced, something absolutely horrific occurred to an animal. Now, I am an animal lover, and I do not like seeing anything that involves cruelty to animals or children. But what made this worse is it felt gratuitous, and it was so off-putting. It took me a bit of time to be able to continue reading. I just didn't understand why it was included. If it was meant to indicate what that character was like, it didn't need to go that far. Yeah, I'll argue with anyone. It was gratuitous and it was unnecessary, and I think as a result of my very strong reaction to that, I didn't enjoy the rest of the book. I found it a disappointment. I haven't decided if Malfi is not going to be for me. I might try one more, but that'll be the last. If I don't like that, then perhaps he's just not an author that appeals to me. God, how many planes overhead are there? The next book is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. I've actually done a review on this book, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail except to say that this should have been right up my alley. It's fantasy, it has a mystery, and it also involves justices who travel the land to decide disputes. The justices even have certain magical abilities. All of these elements sound fantastic, sound like just the sort of thing I would enjoy. No, I did not like this book for several reasons. There were epigraphs at the beginning of each chapter, which was a legal tenet, usually, not always. And the truth is, though, that they weren't original. But the main reason that I did not enjoy this book was the narrator. The book is written in the first person. Our narrator is Helena, a 19-year-old clerk to Justice Conrad, and she is unbearable. I could not stand this girl. Her decisions throughout this book just did not make sense. We are told on the one hand that she's a street urchin, a tough street urchin, and I saw zero sign of that throughout the book. Her actions came across as a very entitled, privileged young girl rather than someone who has grown up on the streets. But it was the incessant crying that I could not abide. I kept texting my friends saying, "She's crying again. I can't take it." And it's true. And she detracted so much from the entire book, for me personally. And so it was an effort to finish this book. One of the reasons I did is because I owned it and because I bought the entire trilogy. But I have such a strong dislike of Helena that I don't want to finish the rest of the books, and I don't know if I will. But that was disappointing. I was hoping to really love this, and whilst I had a few other minor quibbles with things like pacing or the mystery being dragged out and not enough, say, world building or political intrigue, it was Helena that was the main reason I thought, no, not for me. Snowbound by Blake Crouch. It kind of sucks to have to include him because I love his books, but I did not enjoy Snowbound at all. It is not speculative or sci-fi. It is more a thriller, and I think it was a poor thriller. Very fast-paced, like all his books are, but it is about a lawyer whose wife disappears and who is accused of killing his wife. So I think it's the very first night after the disappearance, he takes his very ill young daughter and vanishes. Goes on the run, basically. I thought, well, come on. First off, he's a lawyer. Why wouldn't he try to defend himself? The evidence was not that strong, and it was way too early to know what evidence, if any, they might have had against him. So I didn't buy that for a second. And then we are introduced to another character, an FBI agent who has tracked him down and wants to utilize him to find these kidnappers, because it may be that this is not the first instance of a woman disappearing. And what ended up being the case, what actually was happening, which didn't bug me so much as how unrealistic the ending was. What happened to our main characters, this final confrontation, it was just bullshit. Yeah, honestly, I think I said that as I was reading the book, and I thought, I can't believe it. I can't believe I don't like this book, because Crouch has become one of my favourites recently. But yeah, this was a miss for me. One of my least favourite books, and maybe that's because it was one of his earlier books, but it didn't work on so many levels for me. Everyone on this train is a suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. This is the sequel to Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. I was trying to decide which one I should include in today's list. The first book or the sequel, the second book. It's still a toss-up for me, but there were certain things that happened in the second that I really disliked. Now this writer, he's come up with this gimmick of speaking directly to us, the audience, giving us the clues, telling us how many incidences of, say, a particular event, or how many pages it will be until a death occurs, that kind of thing. I didn't enjoy that kind of writing. Is it just because it is different to what I'm used to? Perhaps, but it just didn't appeal to me. It came across as a little smug, and he did not, though he told us many times, he did not give us all the clues to guess the ending. It was not possible to actually guess it. And I resent that. I resent being told, no, you've got all the clues. You can guess it. No, that's not how I felt at the end. There were certain things that it was just impossible to know. And I think the first book is more guilty of that than the second. But in the second book, this wannabe author who is on a writer's convention or something on a train ride, and he basically goes to the police and says, but don't you want to hear my theories about the murder? Okay, I'm sorry. I had to laugh at that. I thought, this is so ridiculous. Why would a professional, a police officer, want to hear some mystery writers, and he's not even a mystery writer, he's a true crime writer, why would he want to hear his theories? And yet the author twisted the facts to suit him so that, yes, our main protagonist is vindicated. He was right. He was smarter than the police. Yeah, I didn't like that. That just smacked of hubris to me and conceit, and it was just too contrived for me. An Unnatural Life by Aaron Wagner. This was a sci-fi, a very short novel about a young lawyer who travels to another planet and is looking to help rehabilitate criminals, prisoners, and she goes to assist one who is actually a robot, who then claims that he is innocent. Now, I thought this was going to be about the nature of sentience, of autonomy, and it came across as just a cliche after a cliche. There was nothing fresh in this book. What the author had to say were things I have read or seen previously and done better. I didn't feel there was any real substance to the story, nor was there any real exploration of the nature of sentience. And the reactions of the rest of the society in this planet, even her own flatmate, and the end itself were just too predictable. So unfortunately, that was a miss for me. Number 1, Ladies Detective Agency by Alexander McCall Smith. Now this was a good book, but I personally was disappointed. I think I expected more of it. I've heard about it, my friends love it, and I thought I would love it. It isn't really about a particular mystery, rather there's little vignettes, different mysteries that our main protagonist resolves. Now, one of the problems I had with this book is that it is written by a white man about a black woman in, I can't remember now which country it is in Africa. It's not Nigeria, I don't think, who opens a detective agency, which is very unusual for where she lives. I thought, would he really know what it would be like for a woman in that time period opening a detective agency? I just don't know if he would. I don't know if he actually would understand the attitudes she might face. And that wasn't addressed, and I wanted that to be addressed. And whilst I did enjoy some of the vignettes, some seemed irrelevant. We spent a fair bit of time with her father being sent to South Africa, to the mines. I thought, okay, what's the relevance of this? And it didn't seem many of the stories were connected. He touched very superficially on some issues like abuse, like kidnapping, for example. And I think I would have liked a little bit more than that. If you're going to deal with difficult or hard topics, then don't shy away from it or don't raise them at all. That's kind of how I feel. And I think I felt this was too lightweight and I expected so much more. I actually thought it was going to be just funny, and I didn't find it all that funny. Nor did I find it really charming. So that was a disappointment for me, but it's got nothing to do with the book itself. The book is very well written, it's just not to my taste. Yeah. The next book that I did not like was A World of Curiosities by Louise Penny. At the time, that was the last book that was out by Penny. She now has a new book which I haven't read yet. And I love the Inspector Gamache books by Penny. I've read all of them. I own all of them. But this one I really disliked for several reasons. Something happens that is just completely unbelievable. There is no way I could swallow it. No way in hell. It was just not possible, or it shouldn't be possible. And I just could not get past that. I thought these books are based on reality, so we're told, but what occurred just to create a tension, a plot, was a contrivance that I couldn't accept. So it really took away a lot of my enjoyment of this book. And there were also all these tie-ins with other cases which, again, seemed too far-fetched. It seems to me in the later books that Penny is starting to preach a little bit about a particular topic, whatever it is, whether it's abuse or whether it is discrimination against women, and I'm not interested in being preached at. I have no problems with her including her views on topics in her books, but don't preach at me. And it felt a little preachy at times. And I also didn't like how some of the characters, my beloved characters, were portrayed. They didn't always seem realistic. Honestly, this was a big disappointment because it was the last one I had at the time and I wanted to love it. And I had not been enjoying her last few books, so I hoped that this one would be a return to form, and it wasn't. Honestly, that contrivance that was so far-fetched, yeah, I still think about it now and I get mad that she thought that could fly. Yeah, in the circumstances that she set out, I thought it wouldn't. Yeah, don't insult our intelligence like that. I guess every author is going to have a miss occasionally, right? That was a big, big miss for me. The next three are probably the ones I liked the very least. Yeah, my worst books, if you want to call them that. Or bottom of the rubbish heap. First is The Daylight War by Peter V. Brett. book 3 in the Demon Cycle series. There are 5 books in the series. I have read 4, and I am struggling to find any enthusiasm to read the last, though part of me wants to know how it ends. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to DNF this series, because whilst it started really strong, it has deteriorated for me, particularly the Daylight War, which has the best cover, I think, of all of the books. Now, this is a series that involves demons that come out at night when the sun goes down and terrorizes the inhabitants of this world every single night. The people have become so fearful that they try to use wards and board up in their homes. They certainly can't be caught out unless they have specific wards. And I do like the concept of wards. There is a young boy that we follow from the first book, Arlen, who grows into manhood. And I loved this character. But every book it seemed that the author changed up who these characters were. And these changes were not things that seemed to flow organically, that it was growth in our characters. It just seemed like the author changed his mind and is going to adjust who these characters are. So we're told one thing in previous books, and then in later books we see characters we don't recognize. And that's how this book started, The Daylight War. There is a character who I will call Lady Macbeth, which pretty much tells you what she is like. The character that I love to hate. And we then go into her backstory for far too long. And I thought, I'm reading about a completely new character. This is nothing like the character we knew for 2 books so far. If you are going to portray a character differently in the future, then at least give us a few hints throughout the other books. He did none of that. But that is not the worst transgression of this book. This was a sex romp. Seriously. Not a fantasy. This was all about many different parties in this book having sex over and over again with far too much detail. Now, I'm not a prude. I don't care if there is some sexual content in a book, but I object strenuously to a book masquerading as a fantasy when really it just seems like a historical romance. Because that was how I felt by the end of the book. I was so sick and tired of seeing these parties bonking each other and having to read the details. I thought, that's fine if they have sex. Why do I need the details? Why is it so graphic? It's not necessary. And it just didn't stop. It was so many incidences. And it felt too much like wish fulfillment on the part of the author regarding some of the characters. But also, one of my favourite characters, which is Arlen, behaved atrociously and so out of character in certain parts of this book that I thought, who are these people that I've been reading about? They're nothing like the characters I had learned to like in previous books. This was a huge disappointment. This one I really disliked. And whilst I have a lot of other very strong criticisms of this series, it doesn't pertain to this particular book, so I'm not going to go into them. As I said, I've read 4, and I don't know if I can bring myself to read the 5th. So sad when that happens, when a series starts so promisingly and then just deteriorates, book after book. Yeah. This is another one that I've actually done a review video on it because I really didn't like it. And that is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. This is a debut novel, and I generally don't like to be really harsh on debut novels, but I had many issues with this, particularly the writing. I thought it needed a lot more editing. It was very repetitive in a very short span of time, like in the same paragraph. And the writing was clumsy as well, clunky. It didn't flow naturally. I don't generally notice the writing style. So when I do, I know there's something wrong there, or something that is not appealing to me. And I really disliked the writing in this. Now, I forgot to tell you what it's about. Yeah. All right, this is a book about a book, actually, that can open any door anywhere. And a young woman is given this book by an elderly man, and she discovers that she can travel all around the world, basically. But there are book hunters out there who are looking to accumulate all these books, including hers, and so it becomes dangerous for her to have this book, to use this book. We are introduced to other characters who mainly seem caricatures or stick figures because there's no meat to them. And our main character I found quite unappealing. I didn't find her engaging. I didn't sympathise with her. Any emotional scenes that she was involved with I found quite boring. And more than that, any emotions that the characters were feeling, we were hit over the head with. It was so heavy-handed, but rather than making me feel more for the characters, it just made me roll my eyes. I did not enjoy this book at all. I was really disappointed because I was hoping I would love it, given that it's a book about a book, or books. Yeah. And the very last book is the one I hated the most, and I did hate this book. Death at Wentwater Court by Carola Dunn. I've been exploring some cozy mysteries to see if I like them, and this was advertised as such. It's an older book, I think, and it is, I believe, set in the 20s. Our main character is Daisy Dalrymple, who is part of the nobility in England, part of the aristocracy. So she is employed by Town and Country, I think it is, to go to all these stately homes in the country and to talk to the residents, also aristocracy, and maybe take a few photos for their magazine. Being another aristocrat, they will more likely talk to her than another journalist. So she goes to this place and we meet all the residents and the family, and a murder takes place. And a policeman, Chief Inspector, I think, from Scotland Yard, comes down to investigate. It's not certain at the beginning whether it was an accident or a murder. And he basically tells Daisy all the facts. He does not hide anything. He basically uses her as a stenographer. And I thought, why isn't she a suspect? She's in this house. She should at least be cleared as a suspect. And it bugged me for a long time, but I thought, okay, fine, I'll put up with that. And Daisy kept telling us how, I need to be honest. I cannot lie to the police. Yeah, right. But what actually happens? We find out who caused this death, and Daisy decides to assist the family to send the perpetrator, I'll call him, out of the country to avoid prosecution. Wow, we spent at least, I think, 30% of the book just on that. And I thought, what? This is a character who hasn't stopped spouting how I have to be honest to the police, who has got some feelings toward this chief inspector, and then she's lying to him and planning and executing this plan to send someone away out of the country so he doesn't have to face charges. And why, you might ask? Because, this family could not suffer the scandal. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Now, this book infuriated me. The entitlement, the privilege. Wow, I absolutely hated the resolution of this book more than I can say. And I thought all the other issues I've got are just compounded by this. How the author thought this would be acceptable, I don't know. What is it? Is it an admiration of aristocrats that we think they should get away with murder? They should get away even if it was an accidental death? No. Big deal that there would be a scandal. Things happen. Doesn't the person who died deserve some justice? Clearly not. Not in this case anyway. And it wasn't as if I had loved the writing. I did like the character of Daisy until she proved to be a complete hypocrite. But the writing was so forced and heavy-handed. The author kept including all the sayings or idioms and customs of, say, the 1920s to try to make it authentic, I think. It didn't work. It just seemed very clumsy writing. So I wasn't impressed with that, but the end of the book has decided me that I don't want to read any more in this series. I don't care if it improves, because I know this isn't the author's first book. Apparently she writes romances. Yes, she should stick to those. But this one, was just one of my absolute least favourites of last year. I hated it so much. Cannot recommend it. Well, that is my list of least favourite books. I tried to limit it to 10 since I also had some DNFs. Now, of course, I want to hear what you think of my list. Do you disagree with me on some of these? What were some of the books you liked the least as well in 2024? I always want to hear from you. You can let me know down in the comments. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then you know what to do, right? You can expect to see my favourite reads of 2024 in the next week or so. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I wish you all the best for 2025. Bye.